Derby's sinister case, the Philpott family tragedy unveiled. 6 innocent children lost their lives in a house fire, but was it a tragic accident, or was it something far more sinister? In the early hours of May 11, 2012, flames tore through a family home in Derby, England, as 6 young children slept inside. The fire spread rapidly, trapping them in their bedrooms, leaving no escape. Their parents, Mick and Mairead Philpott, stood outside, crying for help, screaming in agony. But was this display of grief genuine, or was it all an act? As investigators sifted through the ashes, they uncovered something far more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. It looked like a tragic mistake, but the truth behind it was far darker. It was a cold, calculated act, planned down to the last detail by Mick Philpott himself. A man fueled by greed, a thirst for dominance, and an obsessive desire to bend others to his will, set his own home ablaze, knowing his children were trapped inside. But the question that still haunts everyone is why? What kind of father does the unthinkable, sacrificing his own children? What was so important that he was willing to burn his family alive? As the layers of the Philpott case peeled back, the world was left stunned by the depth of his cruelty. This was not just murder, it was the ultimate betrayal. Mick Philpott's story isn't just one of violence. It's a chilling descent into madness. Born in 1956 in Derby, England, he wasn't known for love or devotion. No, he was infamous for something far darker: control, cruelty, and an insatiable hunger for power over the women in his life. By the time Mick was 19, he had already chosen his first victim, 15-year-old Kim Hill. For Kim, it felt like the start of something special. She saw him as protective and cared when no one else did. He made her believe she was safe, but safety was the first lie. The abuse crept in slowly, like a shadow growing darker every day. It started with shoves, cruel words, and slamming doors. Before long, it turned into something far more violent. Mick didn't care where they were or who watched. He controlled her with his fists, breaking her down piece by piece. Once, inside a crowded pub, he grabbed a pool cue and smashed it across her mouth. Blood spilled down her chin, but not a soul moved. People watched, but no one dared to stop him. Mick soaked in that power. It made him feel invincible. His jealousy twisted into cruelty. If Kim smiled too long at someone, she paid the price. One day, because she doted on a baby, he crushed her kneecap with a hammer and broke her arm. Another time, furious over her dress, he aimed a crossbow at her and shot her in the groin. The pain was unbearable, but the humiliation cut deeper. Kim stayed silent. She told herself it would get better, that he would change, but deep down she knew the truth. In July 1978, after 2 years of hell, Kim finally found her moment. She wrote him a letter. No screams, no final fight. These are just words that ended it. That was when Mick's obsession turned deadly. Before we continue, if you're captivated by unraveling chilling mysteries and delving into real-life crime stories, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps us bring more cases into the spotlight. Make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you're always in the loop. You never know which mystery we'll crack next. And trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. And if you know someone as obsessed with true crime as you are, share this video, because some mysteries deserve more attention. And together, we can uncover the truth. Enraged, Mick deserted his post in the British Army and hunted her down. Breaking into her home in the dead of night, he found her asleep and did the unthinkable. With a 9-inch knife in hand, he stabbed her. Once, twice, again and again, 27 times in total. As she lay there gasping for breath, he leaned in and whispered, "If I can't have you, no one will." But he wasn't finished. When Kim's mother heard the struggle and rushed in to save her daughter, Mick turned the blade on her, stabbing her 11 times. Blood soaked the floor, the walls, their clothes. But somehow, through sheer willpower, her mother, a nurse, crawled toward help. Against all odds, they both survived. But Mick, he didn't disappear into the shadows. He didn't go into hiding. Instead, this monster carried on with life, ready to claim his next victim. Mick Philpott should have never walked free. After nearly killing Kim Hill and her mother in a frenzied knife attack, he was sentenced to 7 years. Justice, however, took a back seat. Philpott served just 3 years and 2 months. A pathetic slap on the wrist. His so-called good behavior behind bars meant nothing. There was no remorse, no rehabilitation. He is just a monster biding his time. Even from prison, he kept his grip on Kim, bombarding her with letters filled with false apologies and twisted declarations of love. He even dared to propose marriage. But Kim knew better. She would never escape the scars he left, both the physical ones and the nightmares that still haunted her decades later. But Philpott? He moved on, searching for his next victim. In 1986, fresh out of prison, he married Pamela Lomax and fathered 3 children. But his violent ways hadn't changed. Pamela lived in fear, knowing what he had done to Kim. She dared not speak out, hoping he would turn his rage elsewhere. And he did. By 1993, Philpott, then 37, had begun a relationship with 14-year-old Heather Kehoe. Upon discovering the affair, Pamela left him. But Heather, who was young and vulnerable, chose to leave her family to be with Philpott. By the time she turned 16, she had already given birth to 2 of his children. But love wasn't what she found. Philpott tormented Heather relentlessly. His fury boiled over when she failed to give him a daughter. He encouraged his older sons to mirror his cruelty, treating their mother like she was worthless. When he was especially angry, he locked her outside in the garden, leaving her to shiver in the cold like an unwanted pet. Heather tried to leave. Once she even told the police about his violence, but it wasn't enough to break free. The day she finally escaped, she had to climb a fence and leave her children behind. It would take a long, bitter court battle before she could get them back. She later described Philpott as Jekyll and Hyde. Charming one moment, a demon the next. But the worst was still to come. In 2000, he found 19-year-old Mairead Duffy, a young mother trying to escape an abusive past. To her, Philpott seemed like a savior who could protect her and her child. She fell into his trap, moved in with him, and soon had a baby. He proposed the moment she gave birth to their first child, Jade. But Philpott's version of love had never been about devotion. It was about control. Soon his twisted empire grew. At the same time, he brought another woman into his life, 16-year-old Lisa Willis. An orphan, alone in the world, Lisa had no family to warn her, no one to tell her what kind of man Philpott was. She became his mistress, moving in under the same roof as Mairead. One house, one man, 2 women, and absolute terror. Mick Philpott ran his household like a cruel dictator. He ruled through intimidation, emotional coercion, and selfishness. His 2 women, Mairead and Lisa, were more than just partners. They were prisoners of his control. Strangely enough, trapped in the same nightmare, they grew close, treating each other's children as their own. But how did they get here? A disturbing pattern was clear. Philpott always chose girls barely out of their teens, young, impressionable, and easy for him to control. He had a method. He disarmed them with charm, tightened his grip with manipulation, and refused ever to let them go. By 2003, he made it official, marrying Mairead while his teenage mistress, Lisa Willis, stood beside her as a bridesmaid. They all lived under one roof, a cramped 3-bedroom council house bursting at the seams with 11 children. The 2 women worked. The more kids he had, the more money he got in benefits. Philpott even turned to the media, desperate to force the government's hand. In 2007, he appeared on The Jeremy Kyle Show, his arrogance on full display. Facing criticism over his joblessness and reckless parenting, he lashed out, blaming his criminal past, the media, and the government for his failures. Never himself. Then came the most bizarre moment. With the world watching, he proudly introduced his wife and his second wife, Lisa, as if this were normal. He even offered to marry Lisa, divorce her, and remarry her so she wouldn't feel left out of the Philpott name. He loved the attention. The more controversy he created, the more headlines he grabbed. Britain's biggest scrounger, they called him. With his 17 children and £100,000 plus in benefits a year, he didn't care. To him, it was all just a game. But the act was wearing thin. When Conservative MP Anne Widdecombe joined a documentary series to try and reform his ways, she arranged 3 jobs for him, including one at a barrel-making firm. He didn't even bother showing up on the first day. Philpott never wanted to work. He wanted to take. And he took it another way when the government wouldn't give him what he wanted. A plan was forming. A plan is so twisted and heartless that it would make him infamous forever. Philpott didn't live in the family home like a regular father. He lived in a caravan on the property. His wife and mistress? They took turns spending nights with him as if he were some kind of king with two queens. But the reality? He treated them like pawns in his sick, self-serving game. To outsiders, it seemed strange. Why did these women accept their fate? But Lisa Willis did something no one else had dared. In February 2012, she vanished. She told Mairead she was taking the kids swimming. Instead, she ran. She took her 5 children and escaped. No warning, no confrontation, just gone. Philpott lost his mind. Lisa's leaving wasn't just a blow to his ego, but a financial disaster. 5 children gone meant fewer benefits. The money was slipping through his fingers, and he wasn't about to let that happen. And so he made a plan. A twisted, gut-wrenching, unfathomable plan. If Lisa didn't return the children, he would make her look like a predator. He, his wife Mairead, and their friend Paul Mosley plotted something that defied logic. They would set fire to their own home, with their children inside. The idea? Blame Lisa. Paint her as a vengeful mother who wanted revenge. Philpott would be the grieving father, the devastated man who had lost everything. He'd get sympathy, media attention, and, most importantly, his kids back. It was the perfect crime until it wasn't. It was May 11th, 2012. At 4 a.m., the plan was in motion. Gasoline was poured through the letterbox. A match was struck. Flames erupted. However, Philpott hadn't accounted for how fast the fire would spread. It tore through the house unimaginably. In an instant, the house ignited. Upstairs rooms became death traps as fire engulfed everything in its path. Temperatures soared past 500 degrees Celsius, a death trap. Inside, 6 innocent children suffocated on smoke before they even had a chance to scream. Jade, 10, John, 9, Jack, 8, Jesse, 6, Jaden, 5. All of them died at the scene. Their half-brother, Duane, 13, held on for 2 days in the hospital. Then he too was gone. The fire brigade arrived within minutes, but there was nothing to save. 6 children had been murdered by their father. As investigators picked through the ashes, one horrifying fact became clear. This wasn't an accident. It was a fire set with intent, fueled by malice, and it didn't take long to figure out who was behind it. They all died in their sleep, never waking up as thick, suffocating smoke filled their lungs. The fire spread too fast, too violently. By the time firefighters arrived, it was too late. The town of Darby was shaken. Everyone who had known Mick Philpott saw him as a man who lived loudly, a father to too many kids, a constant figure on the local news, and someone who never worked but always had something to say. Many defended him at first, convinced he had loved his children. A local man even started a charity to cover funeral costs, insisting that despite whatever people said about Mick, he didn't deserve this. But something about the way Philpott behaved didn't sit right. At the press conference, Philpott sat beside his wife, playing the part of a grieving father. He thanked the community, asked for privacy, and wiped away forced tears. But then came the moment that left even seasoned officers stunned. He turned to a female officer and flirted, smirking as he called her gorgeous, completely unfazed by the tragedy he was supposed to be mourning. It became clear this wasn't grief. It was the attention he craved. Behind closed doors, his behavior darkened. During a visit to the mortuary, Philpott laughed, cracked jokes, and, at one point, put a police officer in a headlock, like it was all some sick game. Police had already begun questioning his story, but the forensic evidence exposed cracks. A gasoline container turned up near the charred house. A glove, soaked in gasoline, was dumped nearby, carelessly discarded by someone confident enough to think no one would find it. When investigators tested the clothes worn by Philpott and Paul Mosley, the results were undeniable. Traces of gasoline told the real story. The man playing the victim had set the fire himself, but Philpott didn't know that the walls were already closing in. Somewhere in that hotel room, hidden and recording, his voice was urgent in the recordings. whispering instructions to his wife. Stick to the story. He admitted that the fire hadn't gone as planned. I swear I never meant for this. He even spoke about watching his wife with Paul Mosley, as if the entire situation was just another twisted episode in his sick, power-hungry life. But then came the moment he slipped. But then just as quickly he twisted reality, brushing off small details, fingerprints on windows, inconsistencies in his alibi. He swore he never mentioned a late-night drive, denied smoking, and denied everything that didn't fit his carefully crafted version of events. Meanwhile, Paul Mosley, the so-called family friend, wore his involvement like a badge of honor. He bragged, flirted, and whispered that he was a suspect, as if that made him interesting. But evidence started stacking up. Gasoline was found on his clothes, a chilling detail no one could ignore. Hours before the fire, Mosley had been with Mered. He claimed it happened on a snooker table, a twisted mix of lust and manipulation. But it wasn't just about sex. Philpott allegedly pushed it, using their encounters to keep Mosley in his grasp, turning intimacy into another form of control. The more investigators dug, the uglier it got. A ladder set up for a staged rescue was abandoned. Gasoline traces pointed straight at them. And then came the secret recordings. Cold, undeniable proof. But what drove them? Was it revenge, survival, or something far worse? On May 28, 2012, Philpott and Mered were arrested for murder. 2 days later, the charges became official. By November, Mosley stood beside them, handcuffed. The trial peeled back the layers of their plan. It wasn't only about punishing Lisa Willis, it was about money. More children meant bigger benefits. A growing family meant leverage for a larger home. The fire? It was a staged tragedy meant to paint Philpott as the grieving father. Desperate, broken, and needing help. They never planned for the flames to rage out of control. Manslaughter charges followed. The sentencing showed no mercy. On April 2, 2013, the jury found them guilty. Mick Philpott was handed a life sentence with a minimum of 15 years. Mered and Paul Mosley each received 17-year sentences, with at least 8.5 years to be served before any possibility of release. Mered tried to appeal, claiming her punishment was too harsh. The court disagreed. Judges pointed to the gasoline found on her clothing, the calculated nature of the crime, and her repeated lies. She had chosen her husband over her children, standing by him even after their deaths. The judges made it clear this wasn't chaos born in the heat of the moment. It was premeditated, planned, and carried out with chilling precision, gone horrifically wrong. There would be no sympathy for her. Ultimately, the fire was supposed to bring Philpott more power. Instead, it exposed him for what he truly was. Not a desperate father, not a wrong man, but a manipulative monster willing to sacrifice everything, including his children, for his twisted gain. Mered Philpott stood in court, her fate sealed. The judge made it clear, her crime was beyond forgiveness. A mother must protect, yet she had allowed her 6 children to burn in a fire she helped orchestrate. Her appeal was dismissed without hesitation. The harm she had inflicted was immeasurable, her responsibility absolute. But justice, it seemed, had its limits. In November 2020, after serving just half her sentence, Mered was released. She was whisked away under heavy security, given a new identity, and placed in a halfway house. Some compared her departure to that of a celebrity rather than a mother guilty of killing her children. Paul Mosley followed soon after, released in May 2021. But freedom didn't suit him. He breached his parole conditions and was sent back behind bars in 2022, only to be released yet again in November 2023. The parole board claimed he was no longer a danger to the public. But was that the case? Meanwhile, Mick Philpott remained in his cell, serving his minimum 15-year sentence. The man who had manipulated, abused, and exploited for years now sat powerless. To him, children had been nothing more than a paycheck, tools to milk the welfare system. Psychologists labeled him a textbook psychopath, a remorseless manipulator devoid of empathy, whose only motivation was domination and the spotlight it brought. Had the justice system failed long before that fateful night? Decades earlier, Philpott had attempted murder. A stricter sentence back then might have saved those 6 innocent lives, but it was too late for justice to turn back time. And that's the chilling reality of the Philpott case. But here's the real question. Was justice truly served? Or did the system fail those children long before the fire ever started? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to read your thoughts. If this story left you stunned, smash that like button, subscribe for more hard-hitting true crime deep dives, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case like the Philpott tragedy. Your support keeps these stories alive and exposes the dark truths most overlook. Stay tuned. We're just getting started.